Okay, there we go. 6 o'clock on the dot. Good evening. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our virtual third Wednesday session. This is a particularly significant one because we're expanding from a Henley South Africa alumni session to a Henley Pan-Africa session. And we are including our amazing chapters in Ghana and Nigeria from here on. I'm hoping that Paul Rajiaka, our chapter lead from Lagos, will be popping in at some point during the session and hopefully be able to close this evening's event. He's just texted me to say he's stuck in Lagos traffic, which I promise you is a worthy excuse. So hopefully we'll see him before June, but I'm hoping will join us. We also have the Africa Dean, John Foster Pedley, on board. John, I can see your photo. Are you there? Are you with us?
I am, but I'm not able to start my video because I'm well shut down by the controller of all this. So I'm right here.
Momo, can you assist? It's a great picture, John.
That's absolutely.
That was in Mozambique, yeah.
So, John, do you want to say a few words and then I'll intro Jonathan?
By all means. You going to get the video rights, Momo?
Yes, just give me a few seconds.
I certainly will. Okay, so welcome everybody and welcome Jonathan. It's an absolute pleasure to have you speaking to the mass ranks of the Continental Alumni. And really is great. And I particularly love your stuff you're doing. I really love the work. It's tremendously organized, structured, very high quality coaching, great publications and a team behind it. And what I particularly like about the center Jonathan's running is it's got such a dynamic to it. It's got such a practicality. It's engaging with people. It really helps. And it's got a very good organization. I think some of the coaching fraternities are wonderfully introspective and sort of, I don't know what to say. But what Jonathan has is a highly organized business coaching that's able to work with people at the highest level of organizations. And for us, that's a privilege to be able to work with you. Thank you, Jonathan, for being here. I really, really do. And to the crew also, I see Eleanor, Barry, and Mamo here. They are bringing together our alumni activities, and we're very, very keen to do more. Thank you for doing all this. I'd like to just share very few words about some of the things that's happening for us recently. We've all gone into virtual mode as most people, so we're running a lot of programs online. We've done 2 or 3 significant things. You'll see behind me, there's this excellence in practice. We won an EFMD case study in a collaboration between Gibbs Business School, Henley, and Standard Bank to bring a collaborative effort to build up their senior executives. I really enjoyed the fact that we are working with one of our greatest previous competitors, collaborating to build value into Africa and for a great bank. I think it's a great story. We also became, I think, 24th in the world in the Financial Times ranking for executive education. I'd like to add, if I may, that quite a lot of that data came from South Africa. Not all, of course, that would be an unfair claim, but it really was a lot. So we're very happy to do that. It places us actually higher ranked than any other business school, accredited business school campus in Africa. So we're happy about that. A couple of other things we're doing. We decided in our virtual learning, we'd learned so much so quickly. We were lucky to be able to turn everything to virtual before the lockdown happened. And we learned so much, we decided we'd share that openly with all the other public universities in South Africa and Africa. So we're running a series of sessions called Build. And what they are is we're getting our tech teams, our ed tech teams, myself, talking about the lessons we learned, and we're sharing everything we learned for free with all the other educators we can, because we feel that the education project for the continent is so big and needs to be shared so much that we should do that. And that's really taking on some traction. And now we're spreading that in through the Association of African Business Schools and the South African Business Schools Association, of which I'm the vice chair, to as many other universities, public and private, as we can across the continent. So if you'd like to let them know, we're going to run those sessions to share everything. It doesn't cost anything. We're trying to build a collegiate of educators across the continent. Please do that. On top of that, we've won some really good business recently as well with a number of clients. We've got a whole series. We worked another free set of sessions with Professor Andrew Godley of the Centre for Entrepreneurship in the University of Reading and Henley in the UK. And we've been helping SMEs for free. We did, I think, 12 sessions. We're going to repeat some of those, and we're going to cover them with Africa. So please, if you know SMEs who would like to be part of that, please let them come along. I'm hoping to be able to steal Jonathan to sit in on and teach one of those as well. Because once you're tied into this, thank you, Jonathan, I appreciate that. Once you're tied into that, there's no stopping. So we've got a real dynamic going. It's tough times. We're distancing, we're highly organized. We're probably going to have to come back to work. We're going to do that in a very, very measured way. And we're also going to be running series on virtual teamwork, virtual leadership, working virtually, and how we manage in a low-touch distance economy, how we work in a distance economy. So that's me welcoming you all. Thank you so much for being part of this. It's an absolute honor. Wonderful that you're here. And I'm going to get out of the way now and let the real talkers get on with it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Amazing. As John just said, it's really it's an honor to have Jonathan with us, zooming in from the UK this evening. And for the alumni community out there, Jonathan's the director of the Henley Centre for Coaching, and he's really one of Henley's truly global thought leadership stars. So it's a real privilege to have him on board. He's also the force behind the Professional Certificate in Executive Coaching, the PCEC, which is a triple accredited 9-month program, hugely powerful, and specifically designed to meet growing need for executive coaching. The exciting news is that this should be delivered in January in 2021, and Jonathan could probably share some more insight on that. And in my perspective, or from my perspective, it's the perfect top-up program for anybody that's a MBA graduate. So something to consider. Mama, is Paul with us? Has Paul joined? Not yet, huh?
Paul is not here yet, but we've got Kakra from Ghana.
Hey, Kakra. What we'll do is we'll do a quick introduction for both of them after Jonathan's presentation, just before we close tonight. And I'm hoping that Paul can actually close the session with some information about what he's planning for the June 3rd Wednesday session. So we'll loop back to them. But for now, Jonathan, can I hand over to you? And very, very keen to hear your presentation, and thanks again for joining us.
Well, thanks, Barry, for that introduction, and thank you, John. I'm really delighted to be connecting into you tonight for this session looking at coaching as a leadership or management style. And as you say, the plans are that we're progressing to deliver the Professional Certificate in Executive Coaching come January 21. And based on our experience in the UK, but also delivering this across Europe, is that those programs are immensely popular. And as you're suggesting, quite a good fit for people who might have completed an MBA or individuals who are already engaged in training, consulting and coaching, but are looking for a professional qualification. And we are probably, we always have to be careful when we make claims, but we're probably the only university in the world who have got a triple accredited coaching program of this kind. So we're accredited by the EMCC, that's the European Mentoring and Coaching Council, by the Association for Coaching, and also the ICF. So people have the potential to get not only a university award, but 3 professional qualifications as well. So that really can kickstart somebody's coaching career. This evening, what I wanted to be able to do is to talk through a little bit around the whole idea of leadership and coaching. Let's see whether we can be successful in sharing the slide pack with you. So here we go. I'm not sure that's gonna, There we go. Okay, that's good. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit around coaching as a style for leading and managing. And recognizing that many of you who are on the call this evening are engaged in leading teams, either face-to-face, but in this COVID world, probably at a distance. What does this mean to take a more coaching-based style to leading and developing others? So I'm going to look at that and look at a little bit of the research evidence around this, share with you a model, but also talk about some tools and techniques that you could use as a leader or a manager. So there's a formal set of plans for what we're going to talk about. In the next 35 to 45 minutes, I'm going to talk about the differences for approaches in leading, of which one is coaching. So coaching is not the only style, it's one of a number. How you as a manager might adopt a coaching style to develop and drive performance in your team, both face-to-face, but also a tool that you can use at a distance as a virtual leader and manager if we're carrying on with social distancing. If you're maybe leading a diverse team who are scattered across a number of countries, different offices or different locations, and think about the key skills that you might need as a leader and manager. And then we're going to wrap up with some questions and some discussion towards the end of our session together before I'm going to hand back to Barry, John, and colleagues from Nigeria and Ghana. So just to start us off with, just for you to think about a question about your own approach to leadership. If you were going to characterize your style as a leader, maybe just in a single sentence, what would you say? Now, you might be sitting at home, you might have a pad and paper to hand. If you do, that's great. In a single sentence, maybe just write that down. Or if you don't have that pad and pencil to hand, what would you say in 10 or 12 words if somebody met you in a lift and said, "Oh, so you're a leader? What does that mean? What do you do?" What would your answer be in that 10 or 20 seconds of the lift journey that takes you up to the 4th floor to answer that particular question? And as you write that down, I'll share with you a second question. If you were to select a single person, a single icon who embodies that particular approach, who would that individual be? Who's your leader hero? Who's the icon that you look up to? Maybe that's somebody who's in the popular media, who is well known. Maybe they're with us now. Maybe there's somebody who died some while ago. Maybe there's somebody who's very personal to you, maybe a family member, maybe somebody who was your first leader or manager, maybe your current leader or manager now in your organization. Who do you look up to? Who embodies your particular approach to leadership, the leader that you think best represents you or that you're aspiring to be? So just a moment to think about those two questions, write that single sentence down, and then think about who is it, that individual who embodies your particular leadership approach. Well, the truth is we all got different people that we look up to. And when we look at the leadership research, there are, you walk into a bookstore or you go on Amazon, a whole variety, hundreds, thousands, probably tens of thousands of books about different leadership styles, about different way that we can lead and engage others. And the model I'm going to share with you today is about a differentiated leadership style. And this model argues that to be the best leader, we need to have a variety of different styles that we draw upon that suit different people in different situations, in different contexts. And the most effective leader is able to change and flex their style to meet where our team member is or to meet that particular individual circumstance or challenge. That if we've only got one gear in our car, that might be great for moving slowly in the traffic in Lagos, but it may not be so good when we're in the open autobahns in Munich. So how do you try and think about flexing and changing your style? Here are 6 icons that I particularly think are great embodiments of different ways of leading. Now, you might recognize all of those 6 individuals. You may not. And I'm going to talk about each one of those and why they're a particular icon for me in terms of what they do. So the first style of leadership that's talked about in this research model and is based on some work from Richard Boyatza, who's a professor at Case Western, and also Daniel Goldman. And is very much based on the concepts about emotional intelligence, about being an intelligent and emotionally intelligent leader or manager. So the first person who's one of my icons is Barack Obama, far left visionary leadership. Why have I picked Barack Obama as a visionary leader? Well, in his 2008 campaign, he talked about this idea of the audacity of hope. Now, very vague terms, but he was setting out an idea that maybe America could move forward in believing in all of its people, bringing its people together and doing good for each individual and putting America back in the world stage as a leader, an ethical leader with a moral vision for taking forward the world and doing so in a fair and just way that treated all of the world's people as well as all of America's citizens in a chance to move up to meet their dreams and their aspirations. This audacity of hope. And the way that he led as a black president for the United States was a way of trying to engage and pull together different groups. So for me, he set out a vision for the future that got people to buy into them. Now, he's not the only visionary leader. There are many examples that you can probably pick from the Portuguese explorer who, on discovering the continent of the Americas, told his soldiers to go and burn the boats. And of course, they're thinking, hold on a minute here, we've just spent months sailing across the ocean from the Iberian Peninsula to discover the Americas. We've risked our lives. Now we're here. Our leaders are telling us to burn our boats. This is completely crazy. But then the leader says, just imagine when we have conquered these lands and have taken the wealth, the gold, the silver, the spoils, these mere trifles of boats won't be enough to carry the wealth back to our friends and our family. And when we sail back into the harbors in Spain, we want to be greeted as heroes, and you, with your friends and your family, will be held up for generations to come. Those leaders were painting a picture of how the future could be for those individuals. And of course, by burning the boats, there was no idea, no potential to retreat. You either died here or you won. And of course, we know how that story unfolded. The great wealth was taken by Spain and Portugal back, and many of those people were hailed as heroes. Second person who's on my list here is Joanna Lumley. Joanna Lumley is an affiliative leader. Now, she's an actress. She's been in many movies as well as comedy shows and is well known for her sense of humor, but also is held up as somebody who is an icon who's got many relationships with politicians. And you may have heard the story about her experience that her father was involved with the Gurkhas and was keen to ensure that the Gurkhas were well represented and well looked after. Now, in the British Army, the Gurkhas didn't have the same rights as many of the other service personnel in the British Army, and Joanna Lumley thought that that was unfair. So she started to campaign on behalf of the Gurkhas to ensure that they had the same pension rights as British soldiers. And the government weren't entertaining this idea. So the story goes that she picked up the telephone, and because she was who she was, because she already had a relationship with the then Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, she was able to get through, speak to him, ask for a meeting, and through charm, through her relationship, was able to persuade him that this was unfair, it was inequitable, and that change needed to happen. Gordon Brown was persuaded, and as a result, using that relationship, using affiliations, she was able to lead or persuade and influence other leaders to make this policy change in the direction of equality and fairness. So sometimes individuals don't need to be in a position of power to be influential, to set the agenda and to lead. that we can lead from many different positions in organizations, and sometimes using relationships, being able to then gain access to people and persuade and influence them, we can have a positive effect. So the next individual is Rassie Erasmus, who is the South African rugby coach, and clearly is one of the world premier rugby teams, has been highly influential in looking and developing talent across that team. And this is true of many top athletes, many top sports team players, that the idea is what you don't want is one individual on your team to shine. What you want is that team to perform to best effect as a group of individuals who are looking out and supporting each other. That's true in rugby, it's true in football, it's probably true in all team-based sports. You don't want one star or two stars, you want the team to work for best effect, to help and support each other. So that's about nurturing individuals, helping them to grow and to develop using a coaching style. But it also means thinking about the overall team. How do we help people to play to their best positions, to play to their strengths? And it's what I call, you don't put David Beckham in goal. You find that person's unique contribution in the team and allow them to play together most effectively, allowing each person to demonstrate their unique contribution, but also taking into account the other players who are working with them. I don't need to talk about the gentleman who's number 4 on my list, Nelson, in terms of the transformational change that has happened in terms of South Africa, and thinking about the democratic style. The democratic leader is one who thinks about how do we move in a direction where we take account of all individuals' views. So peace and reconciliation, as an example of this in the UK, we're currently going through, as most of the world is, the COVID crisis. And there is much discussion about what is going to happen when we have a public inquiry in the United Kingdom into what happened during COVID and who is to blame. And the suggestion that is just beginning to move forward is the idea, instead of having an inquiry where people are blamed and they become the victims of this witch hunt to find who was responsible for the bad decisions that were made, instead we need to have a public inquiry that models itself on what happened in South Africa and also what happened in Northern Ireland, a shift towards peace and reconciliation, and a recognition that actually everybody who has made decisions with the best intentions may have not made perfect decisions. And unless we move in that direction, the policymakers over the coming weeks and months will always have an eye on who's going to be to blame. How can I position myself not to make the best decision, but to avoid blame? And that won't be good decision making. And instead, if we recognize now, we move towards a model of an inquiry that says there will be an inquiry, but actually we need to do this with love and kindness. We need to do that in a democratic way that seeks to learn rather than to blame others. That's going to be the best way of trying to move out from this very difficult political and societal situation that the UK, but also the rest of the globe, finds itself facing during this pandemic. Number 5 on my list, I'm sure you also recognize as well, it's Richard Branson, pace setting leader. Many of you might have come across Richard in his books, but as a leader, he's known for his pace setting style. Richard sets his boards and people in his organization a demanding pace for change. He often moves in terms of a particular business opportunity to very mature markets. He identifies how, if he has a high performance team, he can drive down cost and add value to customers. That's been very successful in airlines, it's been successful in mobile operations, it's been very successful in broadband and in many other areas too. Now, Richard's got around about 30 different interests, and I always ask the same question: which 2 businesses don't contain the Virgin brand name? I'll leave you to a moment to think about that. But his style of leading often results in setting goal objectives and through those objectives or goals, driving performance year on year. So it's almost like saying a coach to an athlete, run around the track. I want you to do it in 60 seconds. You run around the track, you get back, and your coach or your pace setting leader says, okay, run around in 58 seconds. You run round, you're back again, and there's Richard standing there and saying, well done, fantastic. Now 56 seconds, now 54 seconds, now 52 seconds. It becomes exhausting. Great improvements in performance, but what it does is it wears out people in the organization. So pace setting leads to significant improvement performance, but often leads to, after 2 or 3 or 4 years, people saying, I need to leave. I'm going to move on to another role because I am exhausted. They love their time working in a Virgin brand, in a Virgin organization. They know that they've achieved great things. There's only so long most individuals can continue to work there. Now back to that question that I asked about which 2 Virgin businesses. Well, the answer is it's the condom business. Seems to be a contradiction in terms you can't have a Virgin condom. And it's also Richard Branson's funeral business. No one wants to die a virgin. So let's move on to number 6 in this particular list, the commanding leadership style. You'll know this individual, Winston Churchill. In a time of crisis, there needs to be a commanding leadership style. Someone, when the fire bell ringing, doesn't say, let's imagine a time when we're outside and we are safe from this fire. They don't want a time where you're just talking about different options, building relationships. They don't want a coaching style. Oh, let's imagine this goal. Let's think about setting ourselves a goal for leaving the building. They don't want a democratic style. Let's have a vote on who's going to wait for the firemen and women to rescue them, who's going to vote for leading the building now. Neither they want somebody who's going to set an objective that's a demanding goal. Okay, we've got 30 seconds. I want everybody out on the car park by the fire zone to ensure that everybody's achieved that goal. Instead, they want somebody who's the fire marshal to stand up and say, we are leading the building. Let's leave safely. Let's take everybody with us. Let's move out of the building now. And that commanding style in a crisis is known to be highly effective, whether that's a war or a pandemic. So let's have a look at those particular styles. The first 4 of them, the evidence suggests from working with 2,500 leaders that the more we do of the visionary, affiliative, coaching and democratic style, the better the outcomes that leaders have. The more they do of all 4 of them, positive results. Now the other 2, pace setting and commanding, are effective in certain situations. But if they're overdone, if we continue to do that year on year, it becomes exhausting for the team. Great for driving performance, but we also need to blend in some of the other 4 styles to the left. The commanding style, fantastic to kickstart or resolve a particular crisis. But if our leaders carry on leading in a post-COVID world, in a COVID way, it will lead us to rejecting them. That it's fine in the fire, but we can't carry that style of leadership on all of the time. So commanding and pace setting style, very useful in certain situations, but be careful not to overdo them. And when they looked at that whole set of 6, they suggested that the most effective leaders used all 6 of them, but the highly effective leaders were able to use those 4, particularly the coaching style, to help people to build a long-term capability and performance in the individuals and ensure that the team worked highly effectively together. And in a virtual world, in a world of complexity, we need our teams to work effectively together to deliver performance for the organization. There is no I in teams. We need to think about development, and we need to think about people working collaboratively and effectively together. So having talked about that, just a moment for you to reflect for yourself. Who are the individuals who might embody for you, who are your icons for the 5 leadership styles that you would want to be drawing on yourself? Now, you might have identified, well, actually, I lead quite a lot in one of those or 2 of those particular ways. But who are the people that you might be thinking, Who embodies that for me in those styles? You might want to make some notes on that pad or just bring them to mind now. So if we think just focusing on that coaching style, I would argue, clearly as a coach, but also having been a leader and manager in the not-for-profit sector and government, and also in the commercial sector, having worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers, that I know that a coaching style can be highly effective at enabling individuals to achieve their very best, developing them, but also enabling them to collaborate as a team. And that coaching style involves a number of elements that I've set out on the slide here. It means that as a leader, we need to be conversational. We need to be thinking about individuals' development. We need to be encouraging people to think about a focus on change rather than stability. So recognizing that the world is dynamic and that the only thing that we can be certain of, that tomorrow is going to be different from today. Next month, next year, we need to be continually reinventing ourselves, reinventing our processes, reinventing the way that we're engaging with our customers to ensure that we're able to respond to those changing and developing needs. It also encourages individuals to think about self-awareness and encouraging that person to think about, who am I? What are my personal strengths? How do I make best use of those strengths? Back to that idea about we don't put David Beckham in goal. Who am I? How do I make sure that I make use of myself in the best way to make a positive contribution to the team? The next aspect is about self-responsibility. When we've been delayering organizations, taking out various middle management positions, how do we help people to step up, to take more responsibility, to see this as their role, their contribution to the organization, rather than waiting for their boss to tell them what to do? So encouraging that sense of, this is my contribution, this is how I can contribute and take decisions, take the organization forward. But most fundamentally, that coaching leadership style is more about asking the right questions, getting people to think for themselves, than providing the right answers for them. So what we do is develop our team, help them to cope with change, help them to develop themselves, becoming more self-aware and to take more personal responsibility as they move forward. Now, some of you might recognize this character here. This is the leader of North Korea. And if you have ever read or seen any of the media on the North Koreans' website, the leader visits many outfits. He'll pop off to the nuclear production plant and give them a little bit of coaching about how they can improve their performance of splitting the atom and developing a nuclear weapon. And then the next day he's popped off to the croissant factory to give them a little bit of coaching to help the croissant bakers improve the croissants that they're producing. And here's a press release, no doubt, from the North Korean press, and there's a worker at the croissant factory just making notes on what their dear leader is suggesting. Now, of course, this isn't coaching. And of course, Kim, however smart or bright he is, he doesn't know everything about everything. And instead, that's true for most leaders. Most leaders have some knowledge. They're able to work empathetically. They might have a view about some of their teams and some of the tasks in their teams, but the best leaders help individuals to develop. It's true for the rugby coach. They're not the best player on the pitch. They don't know how to play every single pass and every single position, but what they're able to do is bring that team together. So coaching is not about knowing all of the answers. It's knowing when to ask a particular question and encouraging people to collaborate and to be at their individual best. So how might we structure one of those conversations? Well, if I was Kim's coach, I'd be saying to him, one of the things that you need to think about as a framework for your conversation is the GROW model, helping the croissant bakers of North Korea or the nuclear scientists to be really clear about what their goal is. What do they want to achieve? And then thinking about helping them to review where they are at the moment. What's the current reality for their situation? And to review that in an honest and open way. Now, if I'm imposing threats or sanctions, people may not always tell me the truth as a leader. If I'm about to put them in front of the firing squad, or if I'm about to impose some sanction on them, then they may not be as open and honest as I'd want them to be. So having an effective relationship is likely to contribute towards a more honest description of the reality stage. And asking them some questions to help them to really think out where are they at the moment, before we then move on to some questions about options. What could you do that helps you move closer to that goal? And we know from much of the research that encouraging people to be creative in their thinking will generate more options, and encouraging people to focus on the creativity, generating ideas before they move on to evaluate those ideas is also important. So that option stage has two key elements that we need to take one step before the other. Generating ideas, so the brainstorming, the mind mapping, the creative thinking, before we move into evaluation of the advantages and disadvantages of those different options. And while people often have got one or two that they've originally thought of before they come to a meeting, or at least we would hope so, what we want to be doing as the leader manager, as that creative facilitator for this development, as a coaching manager, is getting people to begin to expand that list of 2 or 3 to 4 or 5 to 6 or 7 to 8 or 9. And there are a variety of techniques that we could do that. 6 hats thinking is a very effective tool. De Bono's idea that if we wear a different sort of hat, a different frame of looking at a problem, we could look at it with a black hat. What are the potential things that might go wrong? What would the accountant say? Or if we're thinking from a creative green hat idea, well, what potential ideas could there be out of there? Or an optimistic yellow hat view that, well, okay, well, let's just imagine the future. Or we could look at it from a, what I call the VIP technique. If you were Attila the Hun, how would you go about solving that particular problem? If you had been Idi Amin, what would they do in this particular situation? Or if you were Mother Teresa, how would they solve this problem? Or Barack Obama, or whoever it might be, who's a character and icon for that individual that they're looking up to. And then we could be a little bit more wacky and a bit more creative. What would Bart Simpson think? How would Mickey Mouse tackle this particular problem? What you start to do is to generate some out of the box thinking in new options, new ideas. And once we've got that 8, 10, 12 options, then we can encourage the person at this ideas stage to evaluate them. What are the risks? What are the potential benefits of pursuing that particular option? And start to narrow down to 3 or 4 particular potential solutions that are minimizing the risks and maximizing the returns or benefits before we encourage them to move on to their specific plan or the will. What will they do to move forward with this? How would they then minimize the risks with a risk register or a plan to mitigate or manage those? And how would they amplify the potential benefits? When would they be doing that? What resources? Who would hold them to account? The sorts of questions that we might ask at this will stage as a manager coach. So, having had a framework, what sort of skills do we need to implement in that? Well, clearly questions are the very center of that, and particularly open questions. What, where, when, how, and why. We could really think of those as the how being a rugby post, and then 4 rugby players sitting on the crossbar of the rugby post as the 4 W's, their little bottoms sitting there, the what, where, when, why. So that could be a visual image that you could bring to mind that helps you to frame those questions. When we are asking open questions, we're more likely to get a more detailed and sophisticated insight to the person's thinking than when we ask a closed question. And that closed question is more likely to lead to a yes or no answer. Next thing we need to be thinking about is empathetic listening. So we really pay attention to what people say to us, both the words, but also their body language. How are they using their hands? What are they telling us through their facial expressions, through the dilation of their pupils in their eye, from the changes in their breathing, to the skin coloration change that they might have, to their facial expressions, smiles, or facial expressions of concern. All of this gives us a sense of how they might be feeling, excited, worried, as well as the words that they're saying. And we need to pay attention to that before we frame our question. And the next set of skills are about summarizing for meaning. We need to summarize, and we also need to reflect back. A reflection might be an individual word or phrase. And here I use the visual image of a rose. We're handing back a single rose to that person in the word or sentence that they've used. We're demonstrating that they have been heard because we are reflecting back that single word or phrase. But we also need to use summaries. And summaries are about drawing together a number of things that people have said. So they might have, over the course of 10 or 15 minutes, painted a picture for us, and we're able to then summarize back for them those individual threads to help them see the overall pattern of what they are thinking about and see that afresh and anew. And I might characterize that almost as handing back a bouquet of flowers to the individual, where they're able to then say, I now see what this might mean as a way forward for me. And that bouquet that we're handing back gives a new sense of understanding, a new meaning for that individual. And by drawing together the threads, it's almost like the final paragraph in a chapter of a book, allowing the person to, okay, this is where we are now, before they move on to the next chapter. So as the manager coach, we might summarize at the end of the goal setting. We might summarize to help that person understand more clearly where they currently are now. We might summarize their options, the risks and benefits of each, before we then move on to helping that person to plan their way forward or their will. So summarizing, reflecting, empathetic listening, alongside great questions are the skills that a coach manager needs. So what might this mean in terms of you as an individual? Well, I've got 4 elements that I'm going to talk about here. Thinking about the person, thinking about your relationship, positivity, and then the selection of the right leadership approach for you to move forward with that individual in that specific situation. So let's have a look at each of these 4 very briefly. Well, the person. I think we need to be thinking about how ready that person is to change. We need to be thinking about our organizational culture. If, like Kim in North Korea, that person feels threatened, then they're probably not right for coaching, or the organization isn't right for coaching. We also need to think about the support systems. Do they have other colleagues that they could go to for help and supporting them? What we're trying to do is to make the impossible for that individual more possible. So we're actually moving that person maybe from a directive style of leadership slowly and step by step towards a more coaching based style, where they do start to think for themselves, and where that becomes a possible way to work with them. If we just push them into the deep end, push them into a coaching style, maybe they are not ready for that. The organization is not ready for that. Maybe their supervisor and their colleagues are not ready for that either. So that's the first thing to give some thought to. Second one is our relationship with them as an individual. We need to create a situation where staff feel empowered, that they do have the opportunity to make decisions. We have given them some flexibility to enable them to drive change, where we are sensitive to their individual needs, and we have a trusting, strong working relationship with that individual. And that takes time to build up. So once again, this isn't something that a coaching style we can implement tomorrow, but we need to work towards that, building trust, demonstrating sensitivity and empathy, allowing people to recognize they have some discretion and some flexibility in their roles. Third thing is around hope and expectations. We know from all the psychological research that's taken place that if we have high expectations of individuals, whether they're our children or whether they're our staff, that leads to higher levels of achievement. So set high expectations for your team. Be hopeful and optimistic that they can achieve those goals, but be there like we are with our children to support and encourage them. The little story or the metaphor that comes to my mind is the comparison of the leader and manager who's just recently had a baby at home. And there they are with their team. They are punishing them and sanctioning them when they do stuff wrong. And then they go home and their little baby is just learning to walk. They take the first few steps across the carpet and suddenly they take off their cloak as a leader and manager. They don't rush in and say, 2 steps, that's not good enough. I'm expecting you to walk across the whole living room this evening. You better do that, otherwise there'll be no cuddles tonight. And instead what they do, what all of us do when we see our child take their first step, is we say, fantastic, that's amazing, wonderful, we've got to tell grandma, wow, you are brilliant. Well done, we say. Thumbs up to you. How do we take that style of being so encouraging, so supporting, so nurturing back to our own organizations and in an appropriate way encourage and set greater expectations, but in a way our staff feel as though they're recognized and rewarded for what they've done, with an encouragement to do more. And the last one of this set of 4 is about our approach. Being really clear, understanding what we're doing in having a framework, whether that's the GROW model, the goal, the reality, the options, and the way forward. Being flexible with our teams, so taking them step by step forward, recognizing that different approaches might need to be introduced, different styles of leadership to meet the individual where they are and to respond to different situations in the workplace. So 5 things to take away that you can practically do on your journey towards becoming a leadership manager, a leadership coach, a manager coach in your practice. The first thing that I think that all of us can do is spend more time listening to our staff. And by listening, I don't mean not talking, I mean really listening to what people are saying to us. Listening to our partners at home over dinner tonight, listening to our staff, giving them eye contact, spending some time thinking about what they're saying and responding to the words and the emotions that they're communicating to us. If we just did that one thing tomorrow, that would make a step change in the way that we lead our teams. Secondly, recognizing that change takes time. Time for you to develop your coaching skills as a manager, as a leader. It takes time for our teams to change their behavior in the way that they build and trust us, in their openness with us, in sharing more insights and more of the detail of what's really happening, and also moving towards this chance of having greater responsibility that they step up to and greater self-awareness. Thirdly, encouraging you, but also your team to develop a personal plan. Write down this personal plan for yourself. Get them to write that down. Put it up somewhere where you see it every day. One of the things that I have that is slightly strange when I tell people, but they then see the logic of this, is inside my wardrobe door, I have a personal plan for the year. And what I do is each and every morning that I open that wardrobe to put on my jacket, to put on my shirt, my tie, I would see that personal plan. And I ask myself, what am I going to do today that will move me closer towards achieving that set of objectives? And when at the end of the day, I'm putting my clothes away back in the wardrobe, I have a look on that personal plan. And I ask myself, what have I achieved today that's moved me one step closer to those goals? Number 4 is about practice. It's okay not to be perfect. Like our little children, that as they take a step, we celebrate their success. What we need to be doing is making one additional step each day, 1% improvement day on day, will move us closer and closer to being a better leader, manager, coach. Don't set yourself the ambitious objective of climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in a day. Instead, see it as, today I'm going to take one step further towards climbing that mountain. And if we can do that, a day-by-day improvement, a day-by-day step towards that goal, we will ultimately achieve it. And the last on my set of 5 is getting feedback from the people that we trust. So we don't get people telling us how great we are. Instead, we get some genuine, authentic feedback that we can use for our own personal development. All of you who are listening in to our call this evening will have some unique strengths, some special things that make you you. Understand what they are, play to those strengths, become your own David Beckham. And at the same time, there are things that we can continue to do better with more practice by getting authentic feedback. And those might be a journey of a lifetime, that there are things that we can continue to try and aspire to improve, that will never be the perfect leader and manager, but we can day by day get better. So a few things to draw our session toward conclusion before we move to some discussion and some questions, and I'm going to hand back to Barry in a moment. So please connect to me on LinkedIn. I'd be delighted to connect with you. That will be fantastic. So look me up on LinkedIn. Check out the Henley Center for Coaching for free coaching research resources. There's a number of publications, including some research that we did looking at African coaching. There's also a range of other resources there. If you are a member of the MBA faculty, you might want to check out ResearchGate. Lots of great research that's free to download there. You just need to register, but you can also check out my profile and some of the 50 or so publications that I've got there. Download them, use them, that would be great. And of course, I look forward to seeing you at another event as this at some time in the future. But let's move into some questions at this particular stage, and I'm going to hand back now to Barry, who's going to facilitate that conversation, discussion, and question time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm actually going to hand you over to Mamo, who's going to facilitate the flow of questions to you.
Great. That is fantastic.
Right. Cool. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for that insightful. I was kind of wondering, where do I fit in between the 6 leadership styles? We've got a question here from Nick van der Merwe, who says, hi, Jonathan, just wondering if the why question is really valuable in a coaching context. This would seem to be high risk if looking forward to a solution or different, more positive version in future.
So I think that's a great question, Nick. And of course, depending on the cultural context, why sometimes carries with it a value-laden approach. Why are you doing that? Could mean, whoa, you're going in the wrong direction there. But we can frame that in a way that doesn't carry those value-based approach that questions, undermines the individual. So we could say, I'd be really interested in you just setting out what are some of the advantages you see with that particular approach. Still the why question, but we haven't used the why word, and certainly in a UK context, why carries that in some relationships, but we can also ask it in a way and present it in a way that still explores the underlying assumptions and beliefs without creating that tension, that questioning that the person's going in the wrong direction.
Cool. I hope that was helpful, Nick. The next question is, how do you deal with a team member who wants to be seen as the best?
Well, I want all of my team to be the best is the truth, but I want them to be the best, not amongst the team, but to be the best team. And one of the analogies that I talk about in the coaching center is that I want to create our coaching center at Henley to be Real Madrid. You might like football, you might not, and I apologize if you don't. Now, Real Madrid, why Real Madrid, do some of my colleagues say? Well, Real Madrid is known for having a whole host of different stars. And they might have a team of individuals who are each worth tens, maybe hundreds of millions of US dollars. And they've been purchased from around the world. But what makes Real Madrid successful is not only having individuals who are fantastic, world-class players, but they're able to bring them together in a way that they play as a team, not as living individuals. And they have repeatedly won tournament after tournament, not just this decade, the last decade, and the decade before that, and the decade before that. So they have had this philosophy of, over time, thinking about what's great for Real Madrid. So they are serial winners, but each time, each season, they bring in new stars who are world leading stars and are successful, usually successful at integrating them into the team. Because no team is going to be successful if you've got one individual who wants to be, it's all about me. Yeah. And that might be great for that individual in the short term, but that team won't win anything, and the value of that one individual goes down. We need to, as leaders and managers, develop great teams that allow the individual to be successful, to be the David Beckham, the great player who's fantastic at free kicks. But you can be fantastic at free kicks, but if you've got a goalkeeper who's terrible, you're still going to lose. So you need to have great goalkeepers, great defenders, great midfield, serving those centre forwards and those people who are taking the penalties and the free kicks, like David Beckham.
Absolutely. I guess the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to take more questions just for the purposes of time. And this one comes from Lawrence, and he says, how do I change an employee's mindset from expecting to be spoon-fed to liking the coaching approach?
So I think this comes back to time and expectations. So we need to communicate very clearly about our expectations for our team and for the individuals in our team. And we recognize that change is step by step and is very rarely transformational. And behavior change and changes of people's attitudes take place over many days, over many weeks, and frequently over many months. And that requires the leader to be consistently sharing that set of expectations about how they expect the individual and the rest of the team to be changing. And so one thing that I often encourage people to do is to allow people to make mistakes. To secondly, encourage them when they come with a problem, you ask people to come with a solution. So when the person doesn't come with a solution, that's absolutely fine. Go and have a little bit of a think, come back and see me, go make yourself a coffee, come back, think about it as you're making the coffee, come back, let's have a talk in 10 minutes to see what ideas that you've got. And then put that responsibility with that coaching style back with them. What other ideas have you got? Well, just imagine, let's just think about what would David Beckham do in this situation? What would Bart Simpson do? Whatever, using that style and make it a little bit funny, but encourage that person to start thinking for themselves about what possible solutions that there are, and collaborate with them in exploring some of those ideas and what the risks and benefits are. Now, it isn't a quick fix. It's much easier, much quicker in the short term to say, go and do this. And the person goes and does it. You feel good as the leader and manager, how important I am. Well, there I am. I know what the answer to that is. Just like Kim in North Korea. He tells people what to do, how powerful he is, how wonderful he is. But actually, he's not developing his people. And if people live in a culture of fear and a culture where you direct people all of the time, the more we tell them what to do, the more we take authority away from them, the less we develop them. And instead, like our little babies, we need to encourage them to stand on their own feet, and they will fall over many, many times. And we need to be there to correct them, to set the framework and the boundary, but ultimately also to encourage and support them. So my answer is, it takes time, invest in them, and over the weeks and months, they will, like our own children, grow up to be wonderful, successful members of society, wonderful, successful members of our team, most of the time.
Yeah, this thing is, it's a process, hey?
Absolutely.
So Lindo asked a very Interesting question, something that I've also personally struggled with. How does one approach coaching individuals who are older and have been in a specific environment for years? How do we get them to accept change, especially when you're much younger than they are?
That's a great question, and is a challenge that I faced in my own career. That I was in the UK a director for an organization at the age of 27, and pretty much everybody in the organization, so I was the youngest director in the country in local government, and all of my team were in their 40s and 50s. And that's a common challenge that I faced and other people face. And I think one of the things that you can do there is to respect the knowledge that that individual has, make them feel good, maybe encourage them to be a mentor towards some of the other younger members of the team, but also being really clear about the fact that there is change and that they are expected to move in that direction of change. So giving them some rewards to be a leader, maybe not in a power position, but as a mentor for others, but also communicating that change is there and that you're expecting them to be part, to role model that change. And some individuals are old dogs and that they are reluctant to change, but with the right patting and the right encouragement and the occasional reward and sanction, most people do gradually change. So I recognize it's a difficult challenge, and Lindo, I sympathize with you because I've been there and I have got it wrong a lot of the time, and it's a slow and challenging process to work with some of the old dogs to help them to make that transition when you're a young leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Jonathan. That was really, really helpful. Barry, over to you.
Thanks, Mama. Jonathan, thanks so much. Just hugely insightful, powerful, pragmatic, so much to reflect on. I recommend that everybody that's on the session with us visits the Center for Coaching website, and please reach out to Jonathan and his team if you want more detail around the world of coaching. Jonathan, thanks. I wish you a good evening, and I really hope that we see you on this platform again very soon. And I feel strongly we should construct some vehicle that we can do some more coaching on this platform. So,
I love that, Barry. That'll be great. Thank you very much for having me this evening, and great to connect with your community in South Africa and Nigeria and Ghana. Awesome.
Thanks so much. And before we close, I want to introduce Kakra in Ghana, and is Paul still with us? I don't think Paul's with us anymore. We had Paul Arajiaka in Lagos with us I saw him pop up on the screen, but I don't see him now.
He is with us.
Yeah, he's there.
Can you guys unmute yourselves, Kakra and Paul?
All right.
There we go. Hey, Paul.
Hi, Barry. How are you?
I'm fine. Good to see you, and good to see you as well, Kakra. Paul's is our chapter lead in Nigeria, and I thought it would be an amazing opportunity to introduce him to everybody on this forum tonight, because the June 3rd Wednesday event is going to have a Nigerian focus, and Paul's gonna be the guy hosting that and putting it together. For those of you that haven't met Paul before, he's a very successful entrepreneur in Nigeria. He's an Henley MBA grad. He's got political ambitions, and he's currently doing his DBA at Henley UK. So a complete success story right there. Paul, what I'd like to do, I know we talked about improvising a bit this evening, so if you're okay with it, I'd love you to just perhaps close the session for us and share a little bit about what you are planning for. I think it's June the 17th. I think the third Wednesday in June would be the 17th. So could I hand over to you to close off, and then I wish everybody else a brilliant evening. And
right.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Prof. Jonathan. It's been a very wonderful session with you. I've learned a lot. You could see I'm quite on the way, but I had to tune in just to hook up with this webinar. Well, this is Paul from Lagos, Nigeria. I'm looking forward excitedly to host our next session of this third Wednesday Hangout on the 17th of June. So I'm glad we've tuned in and we've taken a cue of what has happened today, and we hope to also bring a very informative session when we host you guys 17th of June. Thank you, everybody. To have a wonderful evening. It's been an incredible evening with Professor Jonathan.
Thanks, Paul. And just everybody, one thing I forgot is there's an evaluation form that's going to pop up on your screen just before you log off. And Mama and all of us would be very happy if you took the time to fill out the evaluation form. So if you don't mind doing that. John, are you keen to say, would you like to have the final word and just close the session for us?
This John?
This John, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you, Jonathan, and the team for setting us up. Thank you all so much for listening. You know, it's such a pleasure to be able to connect in across Africa. I mean, the one wonderful thing, I suppose, of a very dark time is that we've all become so virtual and the boundaries evaporate and suddenly we're international, we can connect. It is a huge pleasure to connect with everybody. And I think we're all on the same mission. And I think deeply about, you know, what can we do to reduce the Gini coefficients, to build up people around us, to bring good education to everybody, and to really have confidence in ourselves because we've got all the skills we need. Well, we haven't got all the skills we need. We've got all the talent and the basic raw material we need in people in Africa. And I sometimes think we're just not fully confident enough. And I think if we just really have the confidence to learn, then there's nothing stopping us. So our economies can grow. We'll live through this and we'll find a certain substance and depth in ourselves that's really going to flow out into and across Africa and between our countries a lot more. But we're the leaders. You're the leaders of that, and I think you've just got to accept that that's our accountability and responsibility, and let's be brave enough to step into those leadership archetypes that Jonathan has so kindly shared with us. You know, I always say, embrace your imposter syndrome. The moment that word is that you've been shrieked at, you can't do this, and you know, that's the way you should go. You know, just have a go because you're on the edge there. Thank you very much, everyone.